you ready to tell him?
Theodore John Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, was an American mathematician and domestic terrorist. He was a mathematics prodigy, but abandoned his academic career in 1969 to pursue a primitive lifestyle. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski murdered 3 individuals and injured 23 others in a nationwide mail bombing campaign against people he believed to be advancing modern technology and the destruction of the natural environment. He authored Industrial Society and Its Future, a 35,000-word manifesto and social critique opposing industrialization, rejecting leftism, and advocating a nature-centered form of anarchism. In 1971, Kaczynski moved to a remote cabin without electricity or running water near Lincoln, Montana, where he lived as a recluse while learning survival skills to become self-sufficient. After witnessing the destruction of the wilderness surrounding his cabin, he concluded that living in nature was becoming impossible and resolved to fight industrialization and its destruction of nature through terrorism. In 1979, Kaczynski became the subject of what was, by the time of his arrest in 1996, the longest and most expensive investigation in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI used the case identifier Unabomber, University and Airline Bomber, before his identity was known, resulting in the media naming him the Unabomber. In 1995, Kaczynski sent a letter to the New York Times, promising to, quote, desist from terrorism if the Times or the Washington Post published his manifesto, in which he argued that his bombings were extreme but necessary in attracting attention to the erosion of human freedom and dignity by modern technologies. The FBI and U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno pushed for the publication of the essay, which appeared in the Washington Post in September 1995. Upon reading it, Kaczynski's brother David recognized the prose style and reported his suspicions to the FBI. After his arrest in 1996, Kaczynski, maintaining that he was sane, tried and failed to dismiss his court-appointed lawyers because they wished him to plead insanity to avoid the death penalty. He pleaded guilty to all charges in 1998 and was sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. In June 2023, Kaczynski committed suicide in prison. Theodore John Kaczynski was born in Chicago on May 22, 1942, to working-class parents Wanda Teresa and Theodore Richard Kaczynski, a sausage maker. The two were Polish Americans who were raised as Roman Catholics, but later became atheists. They married on April 11, 1939. From 1st to 4th grade, ages 6 to 9, Kaczynski attended Sherman Elementary School in Chicago, where administrators described him as healthy and well-adjusted. In 1952, 3 years after David was born, the family moved to suburban Evergreen Park, Illinois, and Ted transferred to Evergreen Park Central Junior High School. After testing scored his IQ at 167, he skipped the 6th grade. Kaczynski later described this as a pivotal event. Previously, he had socialized with his peers and was even a leader, but after skipping ahead of them, he felt he did not fit in with the older children who bullied him. Neighbors in Evergreen Park later described the Kaczynski family as civic-minded folks, one recalling the parents sacrificed everything they had for their children. Both Ted and David were intelligent, but Ted was exceptionally bright. Neighbors described him as a smart but lonely individual. Kaczynski attended Evergreen Park Community High School, where he excelled academically. He played the trombone in the marching band and was a member of the mathematics, biology, coin, and German clubs. In 1996, a former classmate said, "He was never really seen as a person, as an individual personality. He was always regarded as a walking brain, so to speak." During this period, Kaczynski became intensely interested in mathematics, spending hours studying and solving advanced problems. He became associated with a group of like-minded boys interested in science and mathematics, known as the Briefcase Boys for their habit of carrying briefcases. Throughout high school, Kaczynski was ahead of his classmates academically. Placed in a more advanced mathematics class, he soon mastered the material. He skipped the 11th grade, and, by attending summer school, he graduated at age 15. Kaczynski was one of his school's 5 National Merits finalists, and was encouraged to apply to Harvard University. While still at age 15, he was accepted to Harvard and entered the university on a scholarship in 1958 at age 16. A classmate later said Kaczynski was emotionally unprepared. They packed him up and sent him to Harvard before he was ready. He didn't even have a driver's license. Kaczynski matriculated at Harvard as a mathematics prodigy. During his first year at the university, Kaczynski lived at 8 Prescott Street, which was intended to provide a small, intimate living space for the youngest, most precocious incoming students. For the following 3 years, he lived at Eliot House. His housemates and other students at Harvard described Kaczynski as a very intelligent but socially reserved person. Kaczynski earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in mathematics from Harvard in 1962, finishing with a GPA of 3.12. In his second year at Harvard, Kaczynski participated in a study described by author Alston Chase as the purposefully brutalizing psychological experiment led by Harvard psychologist Henry Murray. Subjects were told they would debate personal philosophy with a fellow student and were asked to write essays detailing their personal beliefs and aspirations. The essays were given to an anonymous individual who would confront and belittle the subject in what Murray himself called vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive attacks, using the content of the essays as ammunition. Electrodes monitored the subject's physiological reactions. These encounters were filmed, and subjects' expressions of anger and rage were later played back to them repeatedly. The experiment lasted 3 years, with someone verbally abusing and humiliating Kaczynski each week. Kaczynski spent 200 hours as part of this study. Kaczynski's lawyers later attributed his hostility towards mind control techniques to his participation in Murray's study. During the Second World War, Murray had worked with the Office of Strategic Services, a U.S. intelligence agency often referred to as the predecessor to the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, where he conducted psychological experiments. Some sources have suggested that Murray's experiments were part of Project MKUltra, the CIA's program of research into mind control. Chase and others have also suggested that this experiment may have motivated Kaczynski's criminal activities. Kaczynski stated he resented Murray and his co-workers, primarily because of the invasion of his privacy he perceived as a result of their experiments. Nevertheless, he said he was quite confident that his experiences with Professor Murray had no significant effect on the course of his life. In 1962, Kaczynski enrolled at the University of Michigan, where he earned his master's and doctoral degrees in mathematics in 1964 and 1967, respectively. Michigan was not his first choice for postgraduate education. He had applied to the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Chicago, both of which accepted him, but offered him no teaching position or financial aid. Michigan offered him an annual grant of $2,310, equivalent to $22,348 in 2022. At Michigan, Kaczynski specialized in complex analysis, specifically geometric function theory. Professor Peter Duran said of Kaczynski, "He was an unusual person. He was not like the other graduate students. He was much more focused about his work. He had a drive to discover mathematical truth. George Perenian, another of his Michigan mathematics professors, said, "It is not enough to say he was smart." Professor Alan Shields wrote about Kaczynski in a grade evaluation that he was, quote, "the best man I have seen." Kaczynski received 1 F, 5 Bs, and 12 As in his 18 courses at the university. In 2006, he said he had unpleasant memories of Michigan and felt the university had low standards for grading, considering his relatively high grades. For a period of several weeks in 1966, Kaczynski experienced intense sexual fantasies of being female and decided to undergo gender transition. He arranged to meet with a psychiatrist, but changed his mind in the waiting room and discussed other things instead, without disclosing his original reason for making the appointment. Afterwards, enraged, he considered killing the psychiatrist and other people whom he hated. Kaczynski described this episode as a major turning point in his life. He recalled, "I felt disgusted about what my uncontrolled sexual cravings had almost led me to do, and I felt humiliated, and I violently hated the psychiatrist. Just then there came a major turning point in my life. Like a phoenix, I burst from the ashes of my despair to a glorious new hope." Golly, girls, could transitioning have saved her? Am I right? In 1967, Kaczynski's dissertation, Boundary Functions, won the Sumner B. Myers Prize for Michigan's Best Mathematics Dissertation of the Year. Alan Shields, his doctoral advisor, called it the best I have ever directed, and Maxwell Reed, a member of his dissertation committee, said, "I would guess that maybe 10 or 12 men in the country understood or appreciated it." In the late 1967, the 25-year-old Kaczynski became an acting assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley, where he taught mathematics. By September 1968, Kaczynski was appointed as an assistant professor, a sign that he was on track for tenure. His teaching evaluation suggested he was not well liked by his students. He seemed uncomfortable teaching, taught straight from the textbook, and refused to answer questions. Without any explanation, Kaczynski resigned on June 30, 1969. In a 1970 letter written by John W. Addison Jr., the chairman of the mathematics department, to Kaczynski's doctoral advisor, Shields, Addison referred to the resignation as, quote, "quite out of the blue." He added that Kaczynski seemed almost pathologically shy, and that, as far as he knew, Kaczynski made no close friends in the department, noting that efforts to bring him more into the swing of things had failed. In 1996, reporters for the Los Angeles Times interviewed mathematicians about Kaczynski's work and concluded that Kaczynski's subfield effectively ceased to exist after the 1960s, as most of its conjectures had been proven. According to mathematician Donald Rung, if Kaczynski had continued to work in mathematics, he probably would have gone on to some other area. After resigning from Berkeley, Kaczynski moved to his parents' home in Lombard, Illinois. 2 years later, in 1971, he moved to a remote cabin he had built outside Lincoln, Montana, where he could live a simple life with little money and without electricity or running water, working odd jobs and receiving significant financial support from his family. Kaczynski's original goal was to become self-sufficient so he could live autonomously. He used an old bicycle to get to town, and a volunteer at the local library said he visited frequently to read classic works in their original languages. Other Lincoln residents said later that such a lifestyle was typical in the area. Kaczynski's cabin was described by a census taker in the 1990 census as containing a bed, 2 chairs, storage trunks, a gas stove, lots of books. Starting in 1975, Kaczynski performed acts of sabotage, including arson and booby-trapping against developments near his cabin. He also dedicated himself to reading about sociology and political philosophy, including the works of Jacques Ellul. Kaczynski's brother, David, later said that Ellul's book, The Technological Society, became Ted's Bible. Kaczynski recounted in 1998, "When I read that book for the first time, I was delighted because I thought, here is someone who is saying what I have already been thinking." In an interview after his arrest, Kaczynski recalled being shocked on a hike to one of his favorite wild spots. It's kind of a rolling country, not flat, and when you get to the edge of it, you find these ravines that cut very steeply into cliff-like drop-offs. And there was even a waterfall there. It was about a 2-day hike from my cabin. That was the best spot until the summer of 1983. That summer, there were too many people around my cabin, so I decided I needed some peace. I went back to the plateau, and when I got there, I found they had put a road right through the middle of it. You just can't imagine how upset I was. It was from that point on I decided that, rather than trying to acquire further wilderness skills, I would work on getting back at the system. Revenge.
I bite at the hand that feeds me, slap at the face that eats me.
She must have been out of her head. Oh, here it is. There's my favorite perfume we've been looking for everywhere. Don't you buy one for me too, and I'll meet you at the door. Okay, okay, bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Possibly in Michigan,
In some strange department store.
won't see him anymore.
Who knows how some people turn to strange ones? Is it up to me to make them into dead ones?
Kaczynski was visited multiple times in Montana by his father, who was impressed by Ted's wilderness skills. Kaczynski's father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in 1990 and held a family meeting without Kaczynski later that year to map out their future. On October 2nd, 1990, Kaczynski's father shot and killed himself in his home. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski mailed or hand-delivered a series of increasingly sophisticated bombs that cumulatively killed 3 people and injured 23 others. 16 bombs were attributed to Kaczynski. While the bombing devices varied widely through the years, many contained the initials FC, which Kaczynski later said stood for Freedom Club, inscribed on parts inside. He purposely left misleading clues in the devices and took extreme care in preparing them to avoid leaving fingerprints. Fingerprints found on some of the devices did not match those found on letters attributed to Kaczynski. Kaczynski's first mail bomb was directed at Buckley Christ, a professor of materials engineering at Northwestern University. On May 25, 1978, a package bearing Christ's return address was found in a parking lot at the University of Illinois at Chicago. The package was returned to Christ, who was suspicious because he had not sent it, so he contacted campus police. Officer Terry Marker opened the package, which exploded and caused minor injuries. Kaczynski had returned to Chicago for the May 1978 bombing and stayed there for a week to work with his father and brother at a foam rubber factory. In August 1978, his brother fired him for writing insulting limericks about a female supervisor Ted had courted briefly. The supervisor later recalled Kaczynski as intelligent and quiet, but remembered little of their acquaintanceship and firmly denied that they had had any romantic relationship. Kaczynski's second bomb was sent nearly 1 year after the first one, again to Northwestern University. The bomb, concealed inside a cigar box and left on a table, caused minor injuries to graduate student John Harris when he opened it. In 1979, a bomb was placed in the cargo hold of American Airlines Flight 444, a Boeing 727 flying from Chicago to Washington, D.C. A faulty timing mechanism prevented the bomb from exploding, but it released smoke, which caused the pilots to carry out an emergency landing. Authorities said it had enough power to obliterate the plane had it exploded. Kaczynski sent his next bomb to the president of United Airlines, Percy Wood. Wood received cuts and burns over most of his body. Kaczynski left false clues in most bombs, which he intentionally made hard to find to make them appear more legitimate. Clues included metal plates stamped with the initials FC hidden somewhere, usually in the pipe end cap, in bombs. A note left in a bomb that did not detonate, reading, "Woo, it works. I told you it would." RV and the Eugene O'Neill $1 stamps, often used as postages on his boxes. He sent one bomb embedded in a copy of Sloan Wilson's novel Ice Brothers. The FBI theorized that Kaczynski's crimes involved a theme of nature, trees, and wood. He often included bits of a tree branch and bark in his bombs. His selected targets included Percy Wood and Leroy Wood. Oh my god, wow. The crime writer Robert Graysmith noted his obsession with wood was a large factor in the bombings. Ooh, you know he would have loved Twin Peaks.
Tonight I would like to speak about wood. There are many times in the world when the phone rings and someone is inquiring about wood. This happens primarily at lumber yards, and in this case it is necessary to have a phone. It is only natural that trees are growing and that they are made of wood. Much happiness can come from observing a tree, and the same can be said about observing the many shapes fashioned out of wood. Quite often, when we are talking about beauty, we are talking about wood. Thank you very much.
In 1981, a package bearing the return address of a Brigham Young University professor of electrical engineering, Leroy Wood Burnson, was discovered in a hallway at the University of Utah. It was brought to the campus police and was defused by a bomb squad. In May of the following year, a bomb was sent to Patrick C. Fisher, a professor of computer science at Vanderbilt University. When Fisher's secretary, Janet Smith, opened the package, it exploded, and Smith received injuries to her face and arms. Kaczynski's next two bombs targeted people at the University of California, Berkeley. First, in July 1982, caused serious injuries to engineering professor Diogenes Angelakos. Nearly 3 years later, in May 1985, John Hauser, a graduate student and captain in the United States Air Force, lost 4 fingers and the vision in one eye. Kaczynski handcrafted the bomb from wooden parts. A bomb sent to the Boeing Company in Auburn, Washington, was defused by a bomb squad the following month. In November 1985, Professor James V. McConnell and research assistant Niklas Suino were both severely injured after Suino opened a mail bomb addressed to McConnell. In late 1985, a nail and splinter loaded bomb in the parking lot of a computer store in Sacramento, California, killed 38-year-old owner of the store, Hugh Scruton. On February 20th, 1987, a bomb disguised as a piece of lumber injured Gary Wright in the parking lot of a computer store in Salt Lake City, Utah. Nerves in Wright's left arm were severed, and at least 200 pieces of shrapnel entered his body. Kaczynski was spotted while planting the Salt Lake City bomb. This led to a widely distributed sketch of the suspect as a hooded man with a mustache and aviator sunglasses. In 1993, after a 6-year break, Kaczynski mailed a bomb to the house of Charles Epstein from the University of California, San Francisco. Epstein lost several fingers upon opening the package. In the same weekend, Kaczynski mailed a bomb to David Gelernter, a computer science professor at Yale University. Gelernter lost sight in one eye, hearing in one ear, and a portion of his right hand. In 1994, Burson Marsteller executive Thomas J. Mosser was killed after opening a mail bomb sent to his home in New Jersey. In a letter to the New York Times, Kaczynski wrote he had sent the bomb because of Mosser's work repairing the public image of Exxon after the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
It's not only the worst oil spill in U.S. history, it's by far the largest in such a remote, pristine area. The tanker, the Exxon Valdez, had just loaded more than 1 million barrels of Alaskan crude. It was about 25 miles from the Valdez terminal and was apparently trying to dodge ice flows from the nearby Columbia Glacier when it ran aground.
I want to assure everyone that Exxon is mobilizing all available resources to mitigate the impact from this incident. Exxon has assumed full financial responsibility for the incident.
Exxon has come under heavy criticism for not moving more rapidly to clean up the spill.
The crews have not arrived yet to begin cleaning the slime off the island's beaches and rocks. That probably won't happen until next week. Exxon says it cannot do the job in a hasty, haphazard manner.
And there's no doubt this is a major tragedy both for the environment and for the people up there.
Day 10 of the oil spill crisis, and the cleanup effort still just beginning. A few crews are on a few beaches removing a little bit of oil, but there are hundreds of miles of affected coastline. Exxon, which is running the operation, is coming under heavy criticism from state and federal officials.
Where the existing management structure of this cleanup is not adequate to the task, then we're going to do it ourselves, independent of that.
Jay Hare, president of the National Wildlife Federation, watched the work for a while and then just muttered.
I appreciate these folks doing this, but quite frankly, I don't see that it's doing a hell of a lot of good.
Hare calls this futile, and he says oil rubbed into the rocks will take longer to evaporate. He intends to push for a new national energy policy, hoping that a national sense of outrage will add to his political muscle.
After the Exxon Valdez ran aground, Exxon spent $3.8 billion on cleanup. But the crews only scratched the surface.
If you just let the water stand for even just a minute, then the oil blobs will start to show.
Still there 21 years after the spill.
This was followed by the 1995 murder of Gilbert Brent Murray, president of the timber industry lobbying group California Forestry Association, by a mail bomb addressed to previous president William Dennison, who had retired. Geneticist Philip Sharp at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology received a threatening letter shortly afterwards. In 1995, Kaczynski mailed several letters to media outlets outlining his goals and demanding a major newspaper print his 35,000-word essay, Industrial Society and Its Future, dubbed the Unabomber Manifesto by the FBI, verbatim. He stated he would desist from terrorism if this demand was met. There was controversy as to whether the essay should be published. Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI Director Louis Freeh recommended its publication out of concern for public safety and in the hope that a reader could identify the author. Bob Guccione of Penthouse volunteered to publish it. Kaczynski replied Penthouse was less respectable than the New York Times and the Washington Post, and said that to increase our chances of getting our stuff published in some respectable periodical, he would reserve the right to plant one and only one bomb intended to kill after our manuscript has been published if Penthouse published the document instead of the Times or the Post. The Washington Post published the essay on September 19, 1995. Kaczynski used a typewriter to write his manuscript, capitalizing entire words for emphasis in lieu of italics. He always referred to himself as either we or FC, Freedom Club, though there is no evidence that he worked with others. Donald Wayne Foster analyzed the writing at the request of Kaczynski's defense team in 1996 and noted that it contained irregular spelling and hyphenization, along with other linguistic idiosyncrasies. This led him to conclude that Kaczynski was its author. Industrial society and its future begins with Kaczynski's assertion the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. I sure agree with that. He wrote that technology has had a destabilizing effect on society, has made life unfulfilling, and has caused widespread psychological suffering. Preach it, girl. Kaczynski argued that most people spend their time engaging in useless pursuits because of technological advances. He called these surrogate activities, wherein people strive towards artificial goals, including scientific work, consumption of entertainment, political activism, and following sports teams.
No, let me transfer you, okay? Yeah, is Selfa over there? Selfa.
Thank you.
You'll have to find. Well, can I just take one of my credit cards out?
Oh, I forgot there was so long. In the ring again.
I'll have to find
4931.
He predicted that further technological advances would lead to extensive human genetic engineering, and that human beings would be adjusted to meet the needs of social systems rather than vice versa. Kaczynski stated that technological progress can be stopped, and in contrast to the viewpoint of people who he said understand technology's negative effects, yet passively accept technology as inevitable, he called for a return to primitivist lifestyles. Kaczynski's critiques of civilization bore some similarities to anarcho-primitivism, but he rejected and criticized anarcho-primitivist views. Kaczynski argued that the erosion of human freedom is a natural product of an industrial society because, in his words, the system has to regulate human behavior closely in order to function, and that reform of the system is impossible as drastic changes to it would not be implemented because of their disruption of the system. He said that the system had not yet fully achieved control over all human behavior and is in the midst of a struggle to gain that control. Kaczynski predicted that the system would break down if it cannot achieve significant control, and that it is likely this issue would be decided within the next 40 to 100 years. He stated that the task of those who oppose industrial society is to promote stress within and upon the society and to propagate an anti-technology ideology, one that offers the counter-ideal of nature. Kaczynski added that a revolution would be possible only when industrial society is sufficiently unstable. A significant portion of the document is dedicated to discussing left-wing politics, with Kaczynski attributing many of society's issues to leftists. He defined leftists as mainly socialists, collectivists, politically correct types, feminists, gay and disability activists, animal rights activists, and the like. He believed that over-socialization and feelings of inferiority are primary drivers of leftism, and derided it as one of the most widespread manifestations of the craziness of our world. Kaczynski added that the type of movement he envisioned must be anti-leftist and refrain from collaboration with leftists, as, in his view, leftism is in the long run inconsistent with wild nature, with human freedom, and with the elimination of modern technology. Although Kaczynski and his manifesto has been embraced by eco-fascists, he rejected fascism, including those whom he referred to as the eco-fascists, describing eco-fascism as an aberrant branch of leftism. In Eco-Fascism, an aberrant branch of leftism, he wrote, "The true anti-tech movement rejects every form of racism or ethnocentrism. This has nothing to do with tolerance, diversity, pluralism, multiculturalism, equality, or social justice. The rejection of racism and ethnocentrism is purely and simply a cardinal point of strategy." Kaczynski wrote that he considered fascism a kook ideology and Nazism as evil. Kaczynski never tried to align himself with the far right at any point, before or after his arrest. He also criticized conservatives, describing them as fools who whine about the decay of traditional values, yet enthusiastically support technological progress and economic growth, things he argues have led to this decay. Wow. James Q. Wilson, in a 1998 New York Times op-ed, wrote, "If it is the work of a madman, then the writings of many political philosophers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Paine, Karl Marx, are scarcely more sane." He added, "The Unabomber does not like socialization, technology, leftist political causes, or conservative attitudes. Apart from his call for an unspecified revolution, his paper resembles something that a very good graduate student might have written." Alston Chase, a fellow alumnus at Harvard University, wrote in 2000 for The Atlantic that it is true that many believed Kaczynski was insane because they needed to believe it. But the truly disturbing aspect of Kaczynski and his ideas is not that they are so foreign, but they are so familiar. He argued, we need to see Kaczynski as exceptional, madman, or genius because the alternative is so much more frightening. University of Michigan Dearborn philosophy professor David Scribner helped to compile Kaczynski's work into the 2010 anthology Technological Slavery, including the original manifesto, letters between Scribner and Kaczynski, and other essays. Kaczynski updated his 1995 manifesto as Anti-Tech Revolution, Why and How, to address advances in computers and the internet. He advocates practicing other types of protest and makes no mention of violence. According to a 2021 study, Kaczynski's manifesto is a synthesis of ideas from three well-known academics, French philosopher Jacques Ellul, British zoologist Desmond Morris, and American psychologist Martin Seligman. Because of the materials used to make the mail bombs, U.S. postal inspectors, who initially had responsibility for the case, labeled the suspect the junkyard bomber. FBI Inspector Terry D. Turchie was appointed to run the Unabomber investigation. In 1979, an FBI-led task force that included 125 agents from the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF.
Whoa! Alcohol and tobacco?
Yeah, and firearms.
Cigarettes and beer kick ass.
Yeah. We're in the Bureau of Beer and Fire and Cigarettes.
And the U.S. Postal Inspection Service was formed. The task force grew to more than 150 full-time personnel, but minute analysis of recovered components of the bombs and the investigation into the lives of the victims proved of little use in identifying the suspect, who built the bombs primarily from scrap materials available almost anywhere. Investigators later learned that the victims were chosen indiscriminately from library research. In 1980, Chief Agent John Douglas worked with agents in the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit, issued a psychological profile of the unidentified bomber. It described the offender as a man with above-average intelligence and connections to academia. This profile was later refined to characterize the offender as a neo-Luddite, holding an academic degree in the hard sciences. But this psychologically based profile was discarded in 1983. FBI analysts developed an alternative theory that concentrated on the physical evidence in recovered bomb fragments. In this rival profile, the suspect was characterized as a blue-collar airplane mechanic. The Unabomber task force set up a toll-free telephone hotline to take calls related to the investigation, with a $1 million reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the Unabomber's capture. With a $1 million reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the Unabomber's capture. After the manifesto was published, the FBI received thousands of tips. While the FBI reviewed new leads, Kaczynski's brother, David, hired private investigator Susan Swanson in Chicago to investigate Ted's activities discreetly. David later hired Washington, D.C. attorney Tony Bisceglie to organize the evidence acquired by Swanson and contact the FBI, given the presumed difficulty of attracting the FBI's attention. Kaczynski's family wanted to protect him from the danger of an FBI raid, such as those at Ruby Ridge or Waco, since they feared a violent outcome from any attempt by the FBI to contact Kaczynski. In early 1996, an investigator working with Bisceglie contacted former FBI hostage negotiator and criminal profiler Clinton R. Van Zandt. Bisceglie asked him to compare the manifesto to typewritten copies of handwritten letters David had received from his brother. Van Zandt's initial analysis determined that there was better than a 60% chance that the same person had written the manifesto, which had been in public circulation for half a year. Van Zandt's second analytical team determined a higher likelihood. He recommended Bisceglie's client contact the FBI immediately. In February 1996, Bisceglie gave a copy of the 1971 essay written by Kaczynski to Molly Flynn at the FBI. She forwarded the essay to the San Francisco-based task force. FBI profiler James R. Fitzgerald recognized similarities in the writings using linguistic analysis and determined that the author of the essays and the manifesto was almost certainly the same person. Combined with facts gleaning from the bombings and Kaczynski's life, provided the basis for an affidavit signed by Terry Turchi, the head of the entire investigation, in support of the application for a search warrant. Kaczynski's brother, David, had tried to remain anonymous, but he was soon identified. Within a few days, an FBI agent team was dispatched to interview David and his wife with their attorney in Washington, D.C. At this and subsequent meetings, David provided letters written by his brother in their original envelopes, allowing the FBI task force to use the postmark dates to add more detail to their timeline of Ted's activities. David had once admired and emulated his older brother, but had since left the survivalist lifestyle behind. He had received assurances from the FBI that he would remain anonymous and that his brother would not learn who had turned him in, but his identity was leaked to the CBS News in early April 1996. CBS anchorman Dan Rather called FBI Director Louis Frehe, who requested 24 hours before CBS broke the story on the evening news. The FBI scrambled to finish the search warrant and have it issued by a federal judge in Montana. Afterwards, the FBI conducted an internal leak investigation, but the source of the leak was never identified. FBI officials were not unanimous in identifying Ted as the author of the manifesto. The search warrant noted that several experts believed the manifesto had been written by another individual. FBI agents arrested and unkempt Kaczynski at his cabin on April 3, 1996. A search revealed a cache of bomb components, 40,000 handwritten journal pages that included bomb-making experiments, descriptions of the Unabomber crimes, and one live bomb. They also found what appeared to be the originally typed manuscript of Industrial Society and its future. By this point, the Unabomber had been the target of the most expensive investigation in FBI history at the time. A 2000 report by the United States Commission on the Advancement of Federal Law Enforcement stated that the task force had spent over $50 million throughout the course of its investigation. After his capture, theories emerged naming Kaczynski as the Zodiac Killer, who murdered 5 people in Northern California from 1968 to 1969. Among the links that raised suspicion was that Kaczynski lived in the San Francisco Bay Area from 1967 to 1969, the same period that most of the Zodiac's confirmed killings occurred in California. That both individuals were highly intelligent with an interest in bombs and codes, and that both wrote letters to newspapers demanding the publication of their works with the threat of continued violence if the demand was not met. Additionally, Kaczynski's whereabouts could not be verified for all the killings, since the gun and knife murders committed by the Zodiac Killer differed from Kaczynski's bombings. Authorities did not pursue him as a suspect. Robert Graysmith, author of the 1986 book Zodiac, said the similarities are fascinating but purely coincidental. At one point in 1993, investigators sought an individual whose first name was Nathan because the name was imprinted on the envelope of a letter sent to the media. A federal grand jury indicted Kaczynski in June 1996 on 10 counts of illegally transporting, mailing, and using bombs. Kaczynski's lawyers, headed by Montana federal public defenders Michael Donahoe and Judy Clark, attempted to enter an insanity defense to avoid the death penalty, but Kaczynski rejected this strategy. On January 8, 1998, he asked to dismiss his lawyers and hire Tony Serra as his counsel. Serra had agreed not to use an insanity defense and instead promised to base a defense on Kaczynski's anti-technology views. After his request was unsuccessful, Kaczynski tried to kill himself on January 9th. Sally Johnson, the psychiatrist who examined Kaczynski, concluded that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz said Kaczynski was not psychotic, but had a schizoid or schizotypal personality disorder. In his 1910 book, Technological Slavery, Kaczynski said that 2 prison psychologists who visited him frequently for 4 years told him they saw no indication that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, and the diagnosis was, quote, ridiculous and a political diagnosis. Some contemporary authors suggested that multiple people, most notably Kaczynski's brother and mother, purposefully spread the image of Kaczynski as mentally ill with the aim to save him from execution. On January 21, 1998, Kaczynski was declared competent to stand trial by federal prison psychiatrist Johnson, despite the psychiatric diagnoses, and prosecutors sought the death penalty. Kaczynski pled guilty to all charges on January 22, 1998, accepting life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He later tried to withdraw this plea, claiming the judge had coerced him, but Judge Garland Ellis Burrell Jr. denied his request, and the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit upheld the denial. In 2006, Burrell ordered that items from Kaczynski's cabin be sold at a reasonably advertised internet auction. Items considered to be bomb-making materials such as diagrams and recipes for bombs were excluded. The net proceeds went towards the $15 million in restitution Burrell had awarded Kaczynski's victims. Kaczynski's correspondence and other personal papers were also auctioned. Burrell ordered the removal before sale of references in those documents to Kaczynski's victims. Kaczynski unsuccessfully challenged those redactions as a violation of his freedom of speech. The auction ran for 2 weeks in 2011 and raised over $232,000. Almost immediately after being convicted, Kaczynski began serving his 8 life sentences without the possibility of parole at the ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. Early in his imprisonment, Kaczynski befriended Ramzi Youssef and Timothy McVeigh, the perpetrators of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, respectively.
That means like in the order that I said them in, or whatever.
They discussed religion and politics and formed a friendship which lasted until McVeigh's execution in 2001. Kaczynski stated about Timothy McVeigh, "On a personal level, I like McVeigh, and I imagine that most people would like him," but also stated, assuming that the Oklahoma City bombing was intended as a protest against the U.S. government in general and against the government's actions at Waco in particular, I will say that I think the bombing was a bad action because it was unnecessarily inhumane.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
Kaczynski responded to the Harvard Alumni Association's directory inquiry for the 50th reunion of the class of 1962. He listed his occupation as prisoner and his 8 life sentences as awards. Wow, that's kind of cool, actually. In 2011, Kaczynski was a person of interest in the Chicago Tylenol murders. Kaczynski was willing to provide a DNA sample to the FBI, but later withheld it as a bargaining chip for his legal efforts against the FBI's private auction of his confiscated property. The U.S. government seized Kaczynski's cabin, which they put on display at the Newseum in Washington, D.C. until late 2019, when it was transferred to a nearby FBI museum. On December 14, 2021, the 79-year-old Kaczynski was transferred to the Federal Medical Center, Butner, North Carolina. At 12:23 a.m. on June 10, 2023, Kaczynski was found in his cell unresponsive. He was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. Prison officials concluded his death to be a suicide resulting from neglect and lax patrol practices. He was also in the late stages of cancer. The prison guards union blamed the death on insufficient staffing. Kaczynski has been portrayed in and inspired multiple artistic works in the realm of popular culture. These include the 1996 television film Unabomber, The True Story, the 2011 play P.O. Box Unabomber, Manhunt Unabomber, the 2017 season of the television series Manhunt, and the 2112 film Ted K. The moniker Unabomber was also applied to the Italian Unabomber, a terrorist who conducted attacks similar to Kaczynski's in Italy from 1994 to 2006. Prior to the 1993 United States presidential election, a campaign called Unabomber for President, with the goal of electing Kaczynski as president through write-in votes. Various radical movements and extremists have been influenced by Kaczynski. People inspired by Kaczynski's ideas show up in unexpected places, from nihilist, anarchist, and eco-extremist movements to conservative intellectuals. Anders Behring Breivik, the far-right perpetrator of the 2011 Norway attacks, published a manifesto which copied large portions from Industrial Society and Its Future, with certain terms substituted, e.g., replacing leftists with cultural Marxists and multiculturalists. Over 20 years after Kaczynski's imprisonment, his views had inspired an online community of primitivists and neo-Luddites. One explanation for the renewal of interest in his views is the television series Manhunt Unabomber, which aired in 2017. Kaczynski is also frequently referred to by eco-fascists online. Although some militant fascist and neo-Nazi groups idolize him, Kaczynski described fascism in his book as a kook ideology and Nazism as evil. Merrick Garland, who would later serve as United States Attorney General, has cited the Unabomber case as among the most important cases he worked on.